Road podcast, telling the stories of the South Texas racers from the past and present.
Hello, and welcome to Thunder Road Podcast. My name is James Parks. I would like to take a moment to thank our sponsors, S&S Monuments, Top Hat Signs and Designs, Proline Fabrication, and 112 Bodies. In this episode, we will be talking to Bobby Grobe. Now, this is part 2 of the podcast. Bobby Grobe has a ton of stories, and we wanted to make sure that we got all the stories out to you. So please enjoy part 2 of our show. So after you're doing some dirt racing, now we're moving on. We're doing some things again.
So we're getting along, and so I get some extra money, and I buy another new modified, not new, but a 1-year-old car. And
has Al sold you a boat yet?
No, he had never sold me a boat.
Okay.
And,
never?
No, never sold me a boat.
Man, that would have been the ultimate sale.
He found a boat for me to buy, and we actually were supposed to buy it together, and
didn't work out.
No, I didn't hang around long enough to help me pay for it. And anyhow, so I had bought another modified, and I had my last Dirt Works there in the shop. And, of course, the guy that we met on the internet, or Al met on it.
By this time, you're no longer at the Weber location? Or you are still at the Weber location? We were at the Weber location still at that time, okay? And it wasn't too long after that when we moved out. And we actually moved into a shop with James Starry and shared a shop with James Starry out there off of Southern Minerals. Oh, wow.
And that's what kind of started to come along. Well, so anyhow, I had my old car, and an acquaintance that moved from West Texas to San Antonio and got on the internet and was looking for a place to race, and he was a dirt racer, and Al buddied up with him, on the internet, and they're talking, and Mike Trigg, and so anyways.
Now, when you say he was a dirt racer, he was more than just a dirt racer. He was pretty damn good.
Yeah, he's pretty damn good, and so anyhow, met him, and we become good buddies, and he loved to fish, and did
Al sell him a boat?
No, he already had a boat.
Another lost sale. Man, y'all aren't helping Al sell any boats.
Yeah, so anyhow, we start kind of racing together, and then Mike gets rid of his car, and we kind of start making a deal that every time there was a big show or something going on here in Corpus, he'd come down and we'd go fishing Saturday morning, and then we'd race Saturday night. And I had my new car, and he drove my old car. And so anyways, I just kept it around, for whenever Trig came down, and, it was sitting there ready with an engine in it and ready to rock and roll. And so anyhow, later on, so it was in 2007. Well, prior to that, when I sold my first cars, when I met Brian and Chris, and they were wanting to get a car.
That's the Rye brothers.
That's the Rice, yeah. And so they come to the shop. They knew I had my first car, and I was selling it. And so we made a deal, and they bought it, and they had an 0406. I'm not sure where they got it from. And so they start racing out here. And, of course, at that time, we were going to Pleasanton.
So when you say they bought your old car, they bought one of the old modifieds?
Bought one of the old Dirt Works.
Okay.
My very first Dirt Works modified. And so they bought that, and they started racing here. And we were running Pleasanton on a regular basis. That's kind of when I was boycotting the place here, And so anyways.
But this is not the Rye's first rattle out of the box in racing. They've raced before. If I recall, they did some go-karts, possibly.
Well, so yeah, when they were younger, their grandpa, Verl Preston, man, they traveled all over the place. And with Little Monty and with Tanner, and they were a terror wherever they went.
When I came to Corpus, I used to race at a track called Odom International Speedway.
Yep.
And we would have to go get parts from Preston's Auto Clinic.
Yep.
So we would drive from Corn Products during our lunch hour. We would drive from Corn Products all the way to Preston's Auto Clinic in the Bluff.
Yep.
Get a gear, a chain, whatever we thought we needed.
Yep.
And then haul that back to Corn Products all within an hour.
Yep.
But the things we do for go-karts, but let alone race cars.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Well, so anyways, they they had they were a hell of a pair of racers, and it was pretty much when they rolled into the racetrack, everybody's like, well, shit, we're racing for third place money, and so anyways, so they come to the shop and they want to buy a car and they want to get a big car, and start racing modifieds out here, and so anyways, they start racing, and late in the season, they're pretty racy, and they're in the mix for points and they blow a motor. And of course, they come in the shop one day and, man, we need a motor, and I had a spare sitting on the floor, Midwest engine, I mean,
377-ish.
Yeah, and I said, well, you know what? I said, here's a spare, take it and race it, I'll do what I can to, to help you. And so they put it in the car, and they finished running that season. And I really didn't hang out with them at that time, And but they come to the shop, and I helped them with whatever I could, Their dad was, unfortunately, they had a dysfunctional family, and their dad was out of the picture and wasn't there to help them. And so, I'm like, man, I'll help you because your
So
dad
you became the
helped me.
father figure for the most part?
Yeah, well,
You and Al?
I wouldn't necessarily say that yet, and but yeah, took them under my wing and helped them however I could, and basically, if I got something, you're more than welcome to it to help, and I guess it was my thought to give back to the family for, what their dad did for me, but so anyhow, end up finishing the season. Well, then. Things change here, and I think track closed down for a couple of years. And man, it was on rocky ground here on a regular basis. You never knew whether the place was open or not. And so, anyways, one day, however, and I don't even remember how this even got started, but they come to the shop, and their car was parked, and had a race going on. And so, I told Brian, I says, you want to run the car, run my old car? And I'm like, well, yeah. And so actually what happened is Brian ran the car a couple of weekends, and there was a big Labor Day show coming up. And so I was going to run my new car, and Brian was going to run the old car. And they fired a guy at work. And when they fired a guy, it shifted our on-call rotation, and it put me on call for that Labor Day weekend.
You were up.
Yeah, exactly. So on Monday, I'm like, man, I'm not going to go out there and be in the car ready, lined up for heat or feature, and I get a call and I got to go to work.
Life decisions at this point. Life decisions are taking over.
So we're talking in the shop, and of course Chris is hanging out there, and I'm like, Chris, you want to drive? And he's, well, hell yeah, I want to drive, And I
That's
said,
why
okay.
I'm here.
I says, well, so Brian, I said, you drive my new car, and Chris, you climb in. So the old car, we call it Flipper, and so it was half dirt works, and we called it a dirty hot. And because I had a hot chassis earlier and later in 98 or so, and I wrecked it in Pleasanton at Texas Dirt, I wrecked it. And we cut the back end off of the hot and welded it to the back end of the Dirt Works, and that became an R&D car where I was cutting and welding on that thing every week.
Changing. I do recall one of your modifieds at South Texas Speedway. I don't remember what year, but came off for turn 2. Somebody got in the gas and it actually rolled itself over.
That was Chris. That's why we call it Flipper.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
He literally got in the gas. The car stood up and rolled over.
So back in those days, what was trick is to pull the left front about 3 foot off the ground and actually look. I swear he had to look through the floorboard between the door and the frame rail to see down the racetrack, and literally pull the left front off the ground like 3 feet, Old guy named David Trier, we saw him up there in Abilene one year, first time I ever seen it. And I mean, I never seen a
Those
car.
hots were like that. A lot of those, they called them three-wheeled hots. I don't know why they had four tires.
Yep,
but
that's
it was
exactly
just for the
right.
parade lap.
That's exactly right, Well, so anyhow, put both of them in the car for that Labor Day weekend. And so we get out there and we're at the track. And so I'm talking to the guys and I said, okay, now, I said, look, I'm not going to tell you not to wreck the car because I've wrecked every car I've ever owned. I've wrecked more cars than probably anybody around. And I said, I'm not going to tell you. I said, but
Bring me the steering wheel.
If you do wreck, just make sure you're going for the win, Okay. So
how old were the Rye boys at this time?
So they're probably mid-20s or so.
Okay.
Brian's older, Chris is younger, and damn it if they don't get in the same race. And here they are racing. And they're leading. Brian's leading. Chris is running second right behind him. And
at this point, did you say, I think I'm out of a ride?
Well, no, not quite yet. That didn't quite happen yet. And actually, I didn't make that decision. My wife made that decision for me. And
grown-up decisions.
Yeah. And that actually didn't happen until the following year. Well, so anyhow, they come off turn 4, and they're on the top because this track has always been a ridge right around the top. And I see Chris turn that dirty hot down low, and I'm like, oh no. What are you doing? And sure enough, man, they're coming to the checkered flag, man. And Chris slides up in front of Brian, and he missed him by an 1 3/4 inch diameter rear back bumper, and hooked Brian and turned both of them head on in the front straightaway wall.
Oh no!
Yeah,
so close yet so far.
Yeah. So, anyways, wreckers come dragging them both back to the trailer, and so we was sitting there, and I'm like, well, you know what? Get to work, man. Y'all tore them up. There's plenty of parts in here to put them back together, and so they barnstormed and put the front ends back together on both cars, and so we're sitting there talking before the feature's getting ready to start, and I says, all right, look. I said, man, you got to understand the risk for reward. I said, y'all were running 1-2. And Chris well, I thought I could get him.
They were just racing hard because it was brothers.
Well, that's pretty much kind of what I thought, and, but, so be it, And I said, well, just think about this, in an effort for you two to try to figure out swapping, y'all could have been 1-2 for the feature, but now you're 19th and 21st. 10 rows back.
Life decisions. Life decisions were made in turn 3.
And I'm going to tell you what, man, I seen the light click, and they figured it out, at that point.
So here's something about those Rye brothers. A lot of folks don't give those guys enough credit. Those Rye brothers are quiet. I actually say sometimes that they're quiet assassins. Yeah. Those dudes, they don't talk a whole lot. They don't let you know what they're doing. They're not big on social media. But, man, when those guys are there, they're fast. A very good friend of mine helps them with their engines. Yep. Mr. Sanders is a huge deal in my life, and I understand he's a huge deal in theirs. He speaks very highly of those boys. Unfortunately, like I told you earlier, if they were both to walk in here, I can't tell you which one's Chris and which one's Brian. But I'm not the only one, apparently. Yeah. But understand, like I said, I tell my drivers out of my shop, I tell anybody that'll listen, don't sleep on them Ryes because they're going to go. Yeah. And they're going to be there when you least expect it, and they're fast.
Well, I tell you, so that year, I was like, you know what? I'm going to buy a sport mod. That's when sport mods were first coming on the horizon. And I'm going to step back, and I'm going to let those boys drive, and I'm going to get me a little bit slower car, And so we found Al finds a car, finds a really good car, a 1-year-old car up in Dallas, and we go buy it, And it's my intentions that I'm going to step back, and sport mods were starting here, and I'm going to step back and run sport mods and let Brian and Chris run the mods. Well, so then they sanctioned here in Corpus IMCA.
Yeah.
And Pleasanton was sanctioned and IMCA, and they ran Friday nights. And so it's like, you know what? You guys have never raced IMCA, so y'all still qualify as racing for rookies. So Brian drove my old modified. I still had my new modified, another year older, and we had the sport mod. And so what we did is Chris drove the sport mod. That's 2008, and Brian drove modified, and we started racing. The three of us started racing, and ended up. Brian ends up. It was a shortened season here in Corpus. There was some things that happened at the racetrack, and the IMCA section was dropped halfway through. But he ended up winning the modified points championship as IMCA that year as a rookie here in Corpus, and we'd go to Pleasanton on Friday night, and we'd come back to Corpus. And if Corpus rained out, we'd go to Pleasanton Friday, and then we'd go to Killeen on Saturday. And
Texas Thunder Speedway.
Yep. And so then when they dropped the sanction here in the modifieds, we'd go to Pleasanton on Friday night. Chris would come back home and race here on Saturday, and Brian and I would go, and we start racing Killeen pretty regular. And then, depending on rain, we might have been in Waco on Friday. We might have been in Corpus on Saturday. We might have been in Killeen, and then we ventured north to Dallas tracks up there, and ran up there every once in a while, depending on, we made a road trip. And when it all got said and done, we finished the season, and it was the last two race nights, Friday night in Pleasanton and Saturday night in Killeen, was, I'm going to tell you what, man, it took everything. We ran a total of 52 race nights that year.
Oh wow, that's commitment, and a lot of miles.
We put 100,000 miles on Big Al's red Dodge, and running all over the place.
And Al and Leonard traveling with you on most of this stuff?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. They wasn't going to miss a bit of it, And, but they had to kind of split up, because when Chris was coming back here and we were going to Killeen, they had to try to flip a coin on where they wanted to be, and most times they came back with Chris, and I would go with Brian. And so it came down to the feature race in Killeen, man, and Al was there, Leonard was there, and all they had was hot laps that night. We had raced Friday night, and Dean Abbey was the points leader up in the Dallas area, and there was two guys out of West Texas that were second and third, and we were fourth on Friday night. And those two guys out of West Texas showed up there in Pleasanton to race against us, because we were just swapping off, dropping races, and nobody was making no ground on nobody. So they figured they'd come run down against us. Plus they had snow up there, and so they got snowed out, And so they figured we're going to come run against us, because there was rumor they thought we was cherry picking there in Pleasanton, until they showed up to find out just how much competition there really was, And so anyways, we win in Pleasanton that night. We're fourth, we win. And them two guys finished like third and fifth or something like that. So we swapped, and we go to Killeen, and we're 1 point out of the lead in Killeen. And we unload off the trailer, and Chris goes out to hot lap, goes out there, makes one lap, and comes off the back straight and straight back in the pits. I'm like, what's the matter? And he's like, zero oil pressure down the back straight, My heart stopped. I thought Al was going to pass out, And it's like, wow, man. So we start messing with the car and fired it up and had oil pressure. And I said, well, it's only one thing can be. And this is what you think. And I said, well, get 3 quarts of oil out of there and pour 3 quarts of oil in this thing. hey, man, we come this far, just burn that baby to the ground, man. There's no turning back now. And Colleen was notorious about tearing a lot of cars up. And I said, let's just start the race and just
Clean
hope
was
for
known
some,
to be a rough track. It was
Yeah.
fast, but it was known to be rough.
Yep, and the rough drivers too, man. And but anyways, I said all we can do is just hope for some fallout, and we'll see where we end up. He goes out there and lines up about halfway back, and about the second lap or so, this boy's leading. And I mean, I'm like, what's happening, man?
At this point, you're saying it was 3 quarts enough.
Yeah, buddy. And so anyways, he ends up leading this thing all the way until white flag. This guy starts dead last. And I don't know, man. I still think he had nitrous because Chris is going into 3. This guy's coming out of turn 2, and he passes us at the flag stand.
Oh, man. He was
You know,
rolling.
Something happened in that 3/4 of a lap. Well, anyways, that guy ends up winning. Chris ends up finishing second. We win the national rookie points by 1 point.
I don't know how many people. I did not know that. So
Yeah.
I'm sure most folks
I'm
probably
gonna
didn't
tell
know
you
that.
what, man, that was as a car owner and being involved in racing, and that was my absolute biggest
That's cool.
accomplishment, especially with both those boys. Brian winning a
As a
points
team.
championship as a team, So, anyways. Man, we celebrated hard, man.
That drive back wasn't so bad.
Not at all. I don't even remember when we drove back, to be honest with you, And, but.
No, those are huge accomplishments, and that's why I said doing this
Yeah.
podcast gets some of those stories out there. I did not know that. I knew that the Rye boys were competitive. I knew that they were tough, but I had no idea
Yeah.
that had taken place. So,
Yep. So,
props to them for doing that.
Yep. One thing I'm going to tell you, probably my biggest disappointment and my biggest failure is the fact that I couldn't afford for them guys to really race like they should have.
Well,
you
racing's
know?
expensive, and you can't hold that against yourself. You can only do what you can.
I'm sure I'm probably biased about this, but in my mind personally, I think that I've had the opportunity to work with 2 of who I think are probably, definitely, without a doubt, 2 of the top 10 best drivers in the state of Texas.
Just raw talent.
Just raw talent,
And do you think that talent was from the go-kart days, was kind of etched into them, and it was kind of brought through there? Or you think they just had the knack for it?
I think they had a certain amount of natural. I probably want to pat myself on the back and think that I had something to do with some of it. But it was really an awesome relationship, with them to, halfway through the season, Brian was struggling that year with Flipper, because the car was so erratic, and it had its days when it was badass fast, and then it was the most evil thing you could ever drive, and I kind of think that it was probably Lawrence that made a comment one day that I needed to get out of the new car and put Brian in it and give him a better shot. I can't remember if it was really Lawrence that said that or not.
We'll go with that. It
but
sounds like something Lawrence would say.
Yeah, and so I climbed out, and to give him a better shot at running with a car that was much more stable and had a better motor in it, and
The odds were more in his favor.
Yeah, and at that point in time, my wife told me, says, maybe it's best you just stay out. You can own your cars and you can work on them and you can get your fix, and I'll let you be car owner and all that. But, she was always mad because I was just never satisfied when I climbed out. It didn't matter how good I did. It was always like, I should have, if I won, I should have beat him by half a lap, and if I didn't win, and whatever it was. And she's like, you're just never satisfied, and so anyways, so, I stepped aside and, put all my efforts toward them 2 guys, and, I have been, I don't have enough words to say about the things they've done for me personally, as far as driving a car for me. And, I'm going to tell you something right now, they do all the work on the cars. In the beginning, it started out that Brian drove one of my cars, but at a point in time, he wanted his own car. And so I just help him. You know, I don't really do anything financially unless he needs a part, and I've got
Yeah.
it. Chris, you know, my deal with Chris is, you know, look, man, you know, he does the tires and he does the gas and does all the work, you know, and
The sweat equity.
yeah, you know, and so anyways, and he does all the sheet metal, you know, and those boys are hella sheet metal boys, you know.
Yep. No, they've
And,
we've wrapped some cars that they've built some bodies for. So
Yeah.
no, they do stellar work
Yep.
as well.
Yep. But yeah, you know, they've carried me, you know,
That's cool.
to higher ranks, you know, and but we had, you know, we could talk and they had enough knowledge of what they wanted to feel in a car, you know, as far as a go-kart, you know, and you know, I kind of felt proud of the fact that you know, I spent my time knelt down beside the car talking through the window and okay, we're going to do this and this is why we're going to do it and you should feel this happen and look for that to happen and tell me what happened next type deal and you know, and so you know, they got better and better and better at being able to understand and figure out more of what they wanted and they just kept getting faster and faster.
No,
you
so
know,
as a group you grew, whether you realize it or not. As a group you grew.
Absolutely.
They were able to understand what they were
Absolutely.
feeling on the track.
Yep.
They were able to give you feedback in between
Yep.
the three of y'all. And obviously Al rolling the tires out to you.
Yeah,
y'all were able to make those cars faster.
Well, it got to the point where he evolved into he's going to keep the lineups,
Yeah.
you know, and now that I wasn't driving, I could handle the tires, and he'll just take care of the lineup.
So did you just
know?
roll the tires
You
out
know,
as well?
And yeah, well, no, you know, I would put tires on. That was my main job, was putting tires on, you know, and yeah, and you know, and one other thing I got to say about those two guys, I don't know that I've watched anybody out there racing somebody else's car that has protected the equipment as much as those two guys have had, you know, and I owe them a ton for that kind of after the first night that they raced together, you know, they really settled down and they knew how to protect their equipment and
Well, they learned to respect your equipment, and it almost seems like after you had that talk with them, kind of the father-son talk, that set that in motion, the understanding of it. If we wreck it tonight, we may not be able to get to race it tomorrow.
well, plus on
And you
top of
trust
that,
them.
they knew how much work it was going to be to put it together, and so it's like, you know what, you know, maybe I might not stick my nose in there, so I don't have to rebuild this thing for next week. But anyhow, we you know, we had some awesome race nights, you know, in the coming years, and we I guess so in 2009, I guess we bought another brand spank new clutch car and sitting in the shop and just a roller. And we were running a topless race out here, Chris. And both the boys were in sport mods at that time. And anyways, they're in a freight train. And it's a December show. No, it's a Memorial Day weekend show. And anyways, might have been Jimbo Myers or somebody, I forget who it was, hits a front straightaway wall. And, you know, they're bumper to bumper, about 6 of them. And anyways, he goes straight up in the air. And I think Johnny Torres might have been right behind him, and Johnny goes underneath him, and Chris is right behind him, and he ends up coming down right on top of. He ends up standing his car straight up and down between the dash bar and the distributor on our car, and Chris is looking at the fuel cell, you know, and totally destroyed the body, you know, and man, the big old wreck and all this, man. And they're like, oh my God, you know, and what happened? And next thing you know, it's just like in the movies. He comes in the pits there and he's holding the interior sheet metal up and he pulls in. And I said, what happened? He said, I don't know. And I said, well, what did it feel like? And he said, well, I think it'll still go. And so we went and grabbed bungee cords and we pulled all the sheet metal down to where he didn't have to hold. And we took off and he went back out there. And, he took off and was running along and sheet metal and everything was flopping around, just held on with a bunch of bungee cords, and all of a sudden he pulls in the infield, and unfortunately, distributor wire from all the interior bouncing pulled out of the distributor. But it was pretty crazy. You know?
I remember that night when Jim got hung up in the fence. I think he hopped a tire, ended up in the wall, and I think it was right around the flag stand area, and he ended up hanging from the fence.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Yeah, so we parked that car, and we had that brand new car, and we was talking about, well, we can either fix that one or we put the new one together. And Chris says, let's just put the new one together. So, man, we barnstormed in a week, and we built that car, and Brian took off to the track, and it's 6 p.m., and we're still sitting out in the Flower Bluff. And so we did the old CC Speedway, give me 4 fingers of wedge, and dropped it down on this car. Hadn't even been, at 6 p.m. on Saturday night, this car hadn't even been on the ground. Hadn't had 4 tires bolted to it yet. And so anyways, we took off out there. And I don't know if I was that good or it must have been awful damn lucky, one or the other, because we went out there and, I mean, Chris stomped a mud hole in their ass. I mean, just flat ran off with this brand new car. And, the whole time I could see him when we're loading the car on the trailer and we're going to the track, and, and he's just like, we ain't scaled it.
What are we doing?
What
are we doing?
God, I don't know what's going to happen to me. And when he climbed out of that car after winning that feature that night, man, he was like on top of the world, man, And so, and I'll tell you, those things became more important to me than any win I ever made.
As I've gotten a little older, I still do race occasionally, but I've got to where I help more people. I had some folks maybe driving some cars of mine or doing some different things with stuff that I've built or my team has built. That's really gratifying to see those guys do that well. Yeah. Even my kids, racing go-karts and stuff. If I wanted to race, I could go get a car tomorrow and go race, but not everyone has that opportunity. So when you're able to help some of those guys that can't do that, it's a huge gratification, a huge feeling of like, man, I'm glad I could do that for them.
Yeah.
So
it's been kind of we've won some features here and there. It's been kind of a long dry spell with us. That same year we ended up in 2009, we ended up going to Arkansas to Tootsie Smith, and Al, hey man, we got to make this race. They rained out and they're rescheduling it, and we ain't got nothing to do that weekend. Let's go to Arkansas.
I think you did more than make the race.
Yeah, well, we got up there and we and of course, I talked to Clonch, and he was the guy that built the car, and I relied on him a lot, and he's a different guy. Tim Clonch, he's a different guy. He wouldn't give you no information, It was one of those, hey, I'm trying to do this. This is what I want my car to do. And this is what I'm thinking I'm want to do. And his response would be, that'll probably do what you want to do, And he would only, you'd have to give him the answer, and then he'd kind of give you the nod on whether you're on the right track or not, type deal. But but he helped me, and we got up there and we pitted beside him, and man, they're bolting on these 300 psi left rear shocks on these cars and stuff. Of course, we didn't have none of that, and so I'm thinking old school CC Speedway days, man, and well, I'm gonna stick this big old monster spring in the left rear and do the same thing you're doing with a jacked up shock, and so we get out there, and Chris starts a couple of rows back, and next thing you know, it ain't but 2 or 3 laps, 4 laps, and this boy's in the lead, And if you want a driver that can put down 25 perfect laps in a row,
consistency,
he's the guy. And he got out there and he led that whole thing, and them guys tried to make a charge at him. And, there's some heavy hitters that were in that show, and they couldn't touch him, and, that's biggest payday for all of us, And
no, it's a huge accomplishment. It's a huge accomplishment for the team as a whole, for what you guys had, what you were able to put into the car, where you came from. Obviously, to look back at those guys, Al and Leonard and the Rye Boys and yourself, that's a huge accomplishment.
Yeah. Well, Yeah, it was pretty exciting for us, and really the first real big check.
Yeah.
Got to hang on the wall, and
Nothing wrong with that.
Chris rode with that the whole way, man. Didn't even let none of us hold it, but man, we come back, and I guess we was in about Lufkin or something like that, and Chris and Brian's family didn't get to go with us. It's too far, and their kids were too young, and so it was Susan and I and Big Al and Brian and Chris. And anyways, they made that phone call, and told Mama to go to the store and get this, and this, and this. And they had it ready when we got to town. And, man, we had a big old party. And, and so we got a great family,
Good deal. And it sounds like those boys aren't blood family, but they are family.
So there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears between us, and we've shared them all, and so.
So let's talk about that. So we won the Tootsie Smith Memorial. Things are rolling along, and then we had some bad luck. We had some tragedy come up. We
come along, and actually Susan and I and Big Al, New Year's, we went to Louisiana to go gambling. And we gambled New Year's weekend, and we come back to town, and I got a phone call from Ronnie's Marine later that week, and said Big Al was walking across the showroom floor, talking on the phone, and dropped dead.
Selling a boat.
Something.
We're gonna say he was selling a boat.
Yep, and he was making a deal on something.
Oh yeah,
always.
He was always
making
wheeling
a deal on
and
something.
dealing.
And so it really, it really caught all of us. I mean,
no, he was a pillar of your racing group. There, he was a pillar of the community, as they would say.
He was certainly my rock. And it was pretty tragic to all of us. And then it wasn't less than a month, and Leonard was diagnosed with cancer. And so he fought it, went through chemotherapy, the first round, about 6 months worth, and struggled, but managed to get through it, and went back for some testing, looked good after the first round of chemo was done. And went back like 3 months later, another follow-up, and they said it came back with a vengeance. And he just said, to hell with it, I'm not going to go through all of that, and it's almost to the day that we lost him.
It's crazy. Those guys were, I'm not going to say whether they were inseparable because I'm sure they had their spouts, but they were good friends.
Not really.
No?
Yeah, they probably hung out together more than they hung out with their wives.
All right. Fair enough.
And,
fair enough.
Absolutely. And we know that they're up there looking down on all of us.
Yes, sir. So where does
racetrack?
So where does SBG go from here? Obviously, we lost Al. We lost Leonard.
It just became kind of obviously when Leonard and Al were still alive, Leonard's grandson Travis came on the horizon.
Yeah.
And so he had already had a car for him, and he was racing, and of course, I became, the lead guy in the shop, and just, helped, all as much as we could. My younger son came on and started racing for a little while till he got married, and, that kind of put an end to that. Well, he's going to college, and so it's hard to come down. Then they moved to Houston and got even harder to come down. And, one thing led to another, and so he quit driving. Brian and Chris's cousin, little Tommy, brought his car to the shop, and we dabbled in a asphalt truck, for Chris, and so we got a giant shop full of race cars. We got
every man's dream
stock. We got truck. We got a couple of we got 2 limiteds for Brian and Chris, and then I still got Dave Lee's car, which was Chris's first car that he wrecked. We rebuilt it and Tommy's got his car and got a couple of pavement cars that he acquired that unfortunately we just don't have a place to go to anymore with.
Asphalt racing in Texas has kind of become extinct.
But whatever decides to pop up in the general vicinity, if the fuel prices go down, we got a car, we can go race it.
They're going to have monster trucks at the race ranch. You got a monster truck getting over there?
I mean, I could put some tires. We got a shop truck. We got a F-150 shop truck, and ain't nothing better to do with it, but yeah, we just, Brian and Chris's kids start getting older, and high school
Life happens,
football,
as they say.
and high school volleyball, and going to college, and so everything pretty much got scaled back a lot, and so we raced when we can, and my deal is. It's like I've told him time and time again, look, there's no pressure. It doesn't matter to me when we race. In the last couple of years that I raced, the plan with Big Al and me was we were getting tired of this every Saturday night and it's getting to be too much work. And I said, man, let's just pick 5 or 6 quality races and go race, every once a month or 6-8 weeks and forget all this Saturday night grind.
Yeah, the drama.
It was starting to not, it wasn't fun anymore because it started to be too much like a job, trying to struggle and I have to put most of that blame on myself because I couldn't manage to quit tearing something up, and if I didn't tear something up, then I decided I didn't like something and was going to change it as well. And
as I said before, racers are our own worst enemy.
Absolutely, that's for sure. But both Brian and Chris, Brian's daughter and Chris's son, they're both in college now, and so not so much sports. They still got sports with Austin and Jill, and so they still travel, and so it's just, hey, if y'all find a race and y'all want to go, let me know and we go,
Gotcha.
And so we're kind of looking forward to doing the same thing. You mentioned earlier before about how much my first win paid, and obviously they don't pay a whole heck of a lot more. And it makes it hard on us because, we don't have any sponsors. And, Brian and Chris's uncle sponsors them. Farron out there, who, after Burl passed away, Farron inherited the auto clinic out there, and he helps them. And man, fuel prices.
Racing has become very expensive.
Race cars and all that, and and obviously, the money doesn't follow. When we go to the pay window, and it doesn't follow suit, and so it's kind of. We want to do everything we can to support local racing, but we kind of feel like we need a little more support. Whether it's the track or whether it's the fans in the stands, and to help us keep supporting it. So it's tougher than ever today, for us.
Fuel prices are up, tires are up, sheet metal is way up. I mean, everything to do with racing is up. Everything to do with anything in general, the price is up. So at some point, I think to myself, what's the breaking point on this deal? But only time will tell. But I'm sure racers over the past 50 years have said, "Oh, it's getting more expensive," and we keep coming back.
Well, it's a drug habit, man. I mean. Cocaine and heroin ain't got nothing on racing, man.
What did the back door of your trailer say? You remember that?
So there's a warning placard on there that says, "Caution, inside this trailer is the disease for which there's no known cure."
Yep. And that's a true statement.
Absolutely,
that's a very true statement.
I wouldn't trade it for anything else. And I look at what I've learned and. Who I've met, and the things I've been able to experience with others, that's probably been the greatest, that, I've had Big Al and Leonard to experience my accomplishments, and I've been able to share the experience with Brian and Chris and their accomplishments, and that's what feeds my fire.
No, that's cool.
And so yeah, we still look for some bigger and better things, and we think we still we ain't rolling over yet, and so we still want to try to do what we can when we can, and wherever we can, and
So earlier in the show, I mentioned that I had learned some stuff from you. I don't know if you even know that, so I'm gonna tell you a couple quick stories about some things that I learned from you and from your group. You once told me that you told Lawrence Maklachek a story about his kids playing sports and how much time that took, and Lawrence told you, "Oh, that'll never happen to me," for the most part.
Yeah.
Not too long ago, I thought to myself, Bobby Grobe is right. Out of the blue, I remember that story. So tell the folks the story.
Well, so what used to happen is, Lawrence, man, we all pretty much chased him every time we seen that 87 car at the racetrack. We just knew who we were going to be chasing, And knowing him from when he started, and knowing his dad way back when I first started, and they were always in them cars, man, day in and day night. They out there thinking, man, they're constantly thinking,
and they still are.
Tweaking.
Nathan and Marcus and those kids
man,
are still doing that.
And so, anyways, I'm racing. And, man, I'm struggling because, man, I'm coaching baseball, and messing with them boys and all that, And anyways, we're always the last. Of course, I'm always notorious about being the last one at the track, And so anyways, I'm always thinking, man, if I just had the time to tinker with my car, we'd be so much better prepared. Well, so we're racing down in McAllen, and we had a conversation maybe a year or so prior here. And I think it was Lawrence and Robbie back then, Robbie Adams, and we were talking, and I kind of made the comment to him about, just wait when your kids get old enough and you ain't got time to be prepared like the rest of us, and so we kind of all just laughed it off. Well, so we're down there in McAllen one night, and man, it was hot laps and get ready for driver's meeting, and man, here comes Lawrence flying in the pit gate, man, about 100 miles an hour, I swear. Comes flying in there and swings around. Of course, he's got his spot, and he whips up in there and unloading the car. And so anyways, sometime during the night, I think it was after the heats, I walked up and I said, what the hell happened to you? David had a T-ball game this afternoon at 3 o'clock. And I'm like, man, I knew it was going to happen sooner or later.
You told me that story years ago, and now my kids are becoming older and they're doing some things. So similar situation, pistol racing or go-kart kind of takes up a bunch of my time. I'm happy to do it, but it was just it was the cold reminder, like Bobby Grobe told me 5 years ago this was going to happen, and it's happening. Another funny story that you probably don't know. I was racing, I believe I was racing in McAllen with a sport mod. Leonard walked by my car, and he looked at my left front, and he goes, oh, you're running reverse camber. And I told him, I have no idea. I don't know how to use a bubble gauge. So race, did decent, went home. I called you, and you didn't answer. I called again, you didn't answer. This was probably an off Saturday. I took my wife to dinner, because I bought a bubble gauge, so I had it on the car trying to figure out. That's why I was calling you. You didn't answer, so I took my wife to dinner. So we're at dinner, and you called me. Boom. I was like, oh man, life's decisions. I really want to know how to work this bubble gauge. Yeah. But I'm at dinner with my wife. Yeah. 45 minutes later, I came back inside the restaurant. My wife had already ate the whole deal, and she was not happy. But I learned how to use a bubble gauge. You taught me how to use a bubble gauge. Well, but that was a funny deal, and that came up at lunch the other day because we were at that restaurant. She's like, "Do you remember when you left me in here for 45 minutes?" I was like, "I forgot about that." But that's a true statement. I tried to get a hold of you, and when you had time, you called, and I was like, "I'm committed. I'm committed." Well, so you taught me how to use a bubble gauge over the phone at a Chinese restaurant. I just want you to know that.
Well, so I tell everybody nowadays, I says, hey, man, when your wife gets mad, just tell her you was talking to Bobby Grobe. You know how he won't shut up. And hey, man, I'm here to help however I can. I mean, if I could take a little heat off of anybody, and it's.
Well, Bobby, we appreciate you coming on the Thunder Road podcast.
Well,
we appreciate you kind of going over the history of how you got started, how you and Al got together, how you, Al, and Leonard then joined, and obviously the Rye Boys, and all of the stories in between. We do appreciate that, and that's the reason why I wanted to put the Thunder Road podcast together, was to get those stories out there. Obviously, I feel like I'm very involved in the local racing scene, and some of the stories you told me today, I did not know existed. And if I didn't know that they existed, many, many other folks in the community don't know. So this is an outlet to get those stories out there, to get those tales out there, to get those accomplishments out there. So we do appreciate you coming on board.
I certainly appreciate the consideration and the thought to have me here, and value anything that I've said, and anything that I've experienced. And it's kind of true about the old timers, because man, the things we used to do back then, you could never do today.
I do have one more question. You told us that the Cadillac was gold and it had a flat tire.
Yeah.
Did you ever go get it? Is it still sitting there?
Well, so actually, so we got to the house, and actually, I guess I probably spent the night there. And but when I woke up the next morning, he was gone and the tire was gone, and
he didn't need you anyway. That's the one tire he put on.
Well, I don't think so. I think he probably called Leonard or Joe Simpson or one of those guys back then, maybe even Harold Cope, and boy, talk about digging up some dirt from the grave, right?
Yep.
But anyways, it's kind of funny because didn't really see him again, and it was really kind of strange. But
cool deal.
One thing I have to probably one of the biggest laughs I get out of people talking about me and my racing and Big Al, and so way back when the internet first started, and it was AOL and getting online, and so Al meets this guy online. Old Rob Gallegos, lives up in Colorado, and they start talking, and Rob's got a decent job and got money and can go where he wants to go. And anyways, make a long story short, Al convinces him to come down, because we were going to Abilene twice a year, go to Icebreaker and the Southern Challenge, and so anyways, Al invites him to come down and race with us, here in Abilene, and so we get a real great relationship. So one night we're on the internet and we're chatting back and forth on the internet. And so anyways, Rob asked me, he says, man, how do you manage to get a sponsor like Big Al? I said, man, it's real easy, man. And he says, what's that? And I said, well, first you marry his daughter and then you threaten to give her back. But anyways, it's been a great life.
Well, cool. Sounds like you've had a lot of fun for sure.
We've had a lot of fun, and we probably could have had more fun, but I'm not sure I could have stood it, and so we'll see what happens the next time we roll a car out of a trailer,
Cool deal.
And hey man, like I always say, it's throw your money on the table. Worst thing to do is come up craps.
There you go. Like I said, we do appreciate you coming on the Thunder Road podcast and telling us your stories, telling us about Al, telling us about Leonard and the Rye Boys and everybody in between. The stories are great. That's the stuff that the people need to hear. So thank you very much.
Well, we appreciate you trying to keep all of that alive.
I'm just doing this because this is what I want to do.
Absolutely. So, all right, man. Well,
cool.
Thanks again.
Thanks. As the checkered flag flies on this episode, I would like to take the time to thank our sponsors, S&S Monuments, 112 Bodies, Proline Fabrication, and of course, Top Hat Signs and Designs. I would also like to extend my thanks to Bobby Grobe for coming on this 2-part episode to tell us his stories, and we'll see you in the next episode.